Why did this data analyst and 90% of other data analysts fail their SQL interview? I was recently sitting at my desk reviewing this long list of resumes, and this one candidate really popped out to me. This person had 7 years of experience and a master's degree, and I thought that their skills might really be beneficial on the team. Seeing what looked like as a promising candidate, I went ahead and scheduled an interview with this person. Things kicked off with a casual conversation, and this candidate mentioned how much they loved problem solving with SQL and how they were actually teaching another person on their team how to use SQL. Now, after hearing this and seeing the resume, I was super excited for the candidate, but things went downhill really quickly. We started off with what I would consider to be a SQL warm-up exercise, and this is just to help knock down the nervousness of the candidate. The answer was going to be about 10 lines of SQL code using a simple join function, but for the candidate, it wasn't. Even with hints, the candidate was not able to answer this basic interview question. After that, we really didn't get into anything much deeper because it was clear that the candidate didn't have the necessary skills. But how could that be? The candidate had 7 years of experience in the industry, had a master's degree, and they were teaching somebody else SQL. Unfortunately, this scenario is all too common, and roughly about 90% of the candidates end up failing their SQL interview. Now, for background, I've been working in tech for 20 years at some of the biggest companies out there, and I've screened thousands of resumes throughout my career. What I've found is 3 common reasons why candidates frequently fail their SQL interview. Many data analysts go out and pick up some free content on the internet or some YouTube videos, and essentially what they end up doing is copying what they're seeing on the screen. Unfortunately, this isn't really learning SQL, but rather what it's like is being in math class, seeing a problem, and then flipping to the back of the book, seeing the answer, and then copying and writing it down. Now, some candidates are able to write the code and solve the problem, but they still fail the interview. This is because with SQL, there's about 5 different ways to write your code and still get the same output. However, just because a candidate gets the same output does not mean that they actually wrote proper code. Within SQL, it's possible to write the code that may take 30 minutes to run, but when the code's written a different way, it might only take 5 seconds to run. And the third reason why candidates fail is because they're not able to clearly articulate what the code is actually doing. This ends up tripping up a lot of candidates during the interview process when follow-up questions are asked, such as, can you explain the difference between a left join and a right join? Or, if we were to change one of these values in the data set, how would this have broken your code? Or, when would it actually be a bad idea to use an index? Now, if all this leaves you feeling a little bit discouraged, you shouldn't be. This is because these interview questions are not all that difficult when you know SQL properly. When you're learning SQL, you want to make sure that you get in-depth knowledge and applied knowledge. That way you can solve a problem in the moment without having to Google for the answer. This will ensure that you know what the code is doing and why you wrote it a certain way, and when you get to the interview, you'll be able to answer the interviewer's questions.